We're on Samach Gimel Amid Beis. Makrile Rav Yehuda le Rav Yitzchak Brei. Rav Yehuda taught a mikra, a pasuk, to his son Rav Yitzchak. A pasuk in the 7th chapter, Koheles, Motzi ani mar mimoves esa ish, which sounds like a wife could be worse than death itself. Homole, Rabbi Yitzchak said to his father, Gon man, what kind of woman? And Rabbi Yehuda responded, Gon imach, like your mother. So the Gemara asks for her, Masnile, Rabbi Yehuda, le Rabbi Yitzchak Rei, Ein Ada Motze, Koras Ruach, Ela Ishto Rishona. Rabbi Yehuda, after all, taught his son that a person doesn't find Ruach, Nachas Ruach, Simcha in his life, except for his first wife. And apparently he's referring to Rabbi Yitzchak's mother. Shenemar says in Mishlei Perek Hey, Yehi Mekorcha Baruch, Usmach Me'eshes Nurecha. The pasuk is interpreted that your wife should be Brucha V'chaviva Beinecha. She's beloved in your eyes, and you'll have happiness from the Ava of Eshes Nurecha. And when Rabbi Yehuda taught his son, Rabbi Yitzchak, this pasuk on Malay, Rabbi Yitzchak turned to his father, Rabbi Yehuda, and he said, Kagon man, what kind of wife is this referring to? And Rabbi Yehuda says, Kagon imach, like your mother. So it seems that she was a good woman. How could it possibly be that Rabbi Yehuda said about her, Motziani, Esa Isha Marmi Moves? And the Gemara answers that both these psukim can be appropriate, can be a good match for her. Why? Miskiv takifa. On the one hand, she would get angry, and she was a takifa, very, very powerful, very aggressive, very insistent. And therefore it's marmi movis. But on the other hand, abure mi abra b'mila. It was very easy to appease her. And she would overlook her midos, mavir al midosov. And therefore you could say about her, usmach me'eshes kurecha. The Gemara says, Hechidam Yishara, what would be a profile of a bad woman? Amar Abai, Mekashtli Aka, she lays out his table with food. Mekashtli Puma, but she also curses umegadefes, very harsh language. Ache yagia zman asuda, kidei litzara. I guess maybe she would kind of yell at him in some way, express her anger and disappointment that he's not prepared for the Suda. It's not clear exactly what that means. Rav Amar, what would be an example of an Isha Ra? Nakashtali, again, she sets the table for food, who, when it's time for eating, Mahadra Legamo. She turns her back to him, and she doesn't want to eat with him. She wants to get him upset. Obviously, there are some problems in the marriage. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Kevan shenasa be'isha v'nosa mispakik. Once a person gets married, his sins are, so to speak, plugged up, which means they are forgiven. Shenemar motza ish tov vayofek rotza me'Hashem. Mishnah says that he finds a good woman, he finds goodness in his life, and he's able to achieve the will of God. And vayofek means avonosov mispakik. This could be part of the reason why A chassan fasts on the day of his wedding, because through the wedding and the marriage, he'll be able to achieve in Eretz Hashem avonosov mispakik. B'ma'arav in Eretz Yisrael, which is the west of Bavel, ki nosiv inish isisah. When a man married a woman, Amri lehach, they used to ask him the following: matzah or motzi? What they were asking was the following: is it matzah, the ksiv matzah, isha matzah tov? You got married and you found your wife to be good, pure goodness, or perhaps she's not so good, motze, which is a reference to the pasuk to ksiv motze ani mar mimavos esolish. Omar Rav, isha ra. If you have a woman who's constantly involved in altercations, getting angry, and she's involved in arguments with you constantly, and she's even amongst her neighbors, she's creating this friction and contention. Mitzvah garsha divorsa tichsiv, as the pasuk says in Mishlei, garesh letz the yetze madon the yishbos din v'kalon. If you'll divorce a letz is someone who's negative, someone who's facetious, then you will put an end to mariva, to altercations, and you'll be able to bring a termination to the midah of din, of harsh justice, and the humiliation that comes in its wake. Because the letz is someone who stirs up arguments all the time, very argumentative. V'yamar Rava, in the Isha Ra, if a person has a bad wife and he doesn't want to divorce her, it's going to cost him too much money. So Rasa B'tzida, then maybe he should marry another woman who should be a tzara. The Amri Inchi, because it's an idiomatic common phrase that when you give a good tochacha to Bechaverta, when she compares herself to another woman who's good, the lo besilta, not with a thorn, so something sharp, meaning a woman will receive tochacha and she'll improve her ways because she's afraid that maybe he'll marry another woman. And that's even more fearful than using, so to speak, physical force. Not that the Gemara is in favor of physical force necessarily. The Amar Rava Kacha Icha Rak Yom Sagrir, which is the day where hail comes down and there's strong winds, so that a bad woman is worse than all that. Shenemar, as it says in Mishlei, Delef Sored Tored Yom Sagrir Yeshus Midyanim Nishtava. The tlaf, which is the rainwater that drops through, and it creates a state of tirda because you got water that's falling on everything, on all your foods and whatever. And it should be equated, this tirda of a leaking roof, to a woman who's bad, and she kicks up all sorts of fights, altercations. They're all equal. The Amar Rava, Bo urei kama tova isha tova kama ra isha ra. Let's look at the two extremes and compare them. Kama tova isha tova, how good is a good wife? Dichsiv matzah isha matzah tov. You want to find goodness? Marry a good woman. Now, if we'll interpret this pasuk straightforward, shebegava mishtoi kra, and we're talking about an isha tova mamish, literally. Let's take it literally. Then kama tova isha tova because of mishtabcha. Why does the pasuk say that he who finds a good woman finds good? On the other hand, even if we'll say that we don't interpret the pasuk literally, but rather The Torah mishtoikra, the pasuk is not to be taken literally as referring to a good wife, but rather it's a reference to Torah, kama tova isha tova shatorah nimshalava. Take a look that if the Torah wants to find an analogy to praise and isha tova, and use the analogy to Torah. I mean, that itself speaks volumes about how important and how great is an isha tova. On the other extreme, kama ra isha ra, how bad is an evil woman, the ksiv in Koheles, motzani mar mavsa isha. If the pasuk should be taken literally as referring to an isha ra, then look how much ra is an isha ra shakasuv megana, that the Torah is telling us how bad she is. And isha begehenna mishtoikraf, this pasuk is just a mashal to Gehenna, then kama ra isha ra shari Gehenna nimshal abba. That the Torah wants to use the mashal of Gehenna to describe an isha ra. Must be serious business. There are other drushes regarding the evil of a bad wife. It says in Yirmiyahu Hanavi, "Hineni mevi alehem ra'ah asher lo yuchlu latseis mimena." I'm going to bring upon you evil you won't be able to get out of. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Baruch. What is the ra here? It's Isha Ra, who gives him such aggravation. And he can't get out of it. Why? Because if he divorces her, he'll have to pay ksuba ksubasa meruba. She has a very expensive ksuba that he has to pay. And at the beginning of Eicha, we'll dash the pasuk, Nesanani Hashem b'idei lo uchal kum. Amar Rav Chizda, Amar Rav Ukva. What does it mean? B'idei lo uchal kum zu isha ra uksubasa meruba. He can't just free himself of her by divorcing her because he cannot afford her. Ma'arav and Eretz Yisrael Amru, that the pasuk means Zeh shemizol nosav tli b'kaspo, a person who has no real estate, or shall we say no farming land, so he can't invest in it. He's got to dig into his pocket in order to buy just simple foods for sustenance, and that means food that grows not in his backyard, in his field, but elsewhere. And he's got to pay for that in the marketplace. Therefore, he's always in a state of worry, of anxiety, because maybe the prices of grains, for example, will go up skyrocketing, and he won't have enough money to buy it. He's constantly in a state of daiga, of worry, because maybe the tefillah will not grow well in the field, and it won't be sold. Now the Gemara brings the klolos of Parshas Tavo. Banecha ubenosecha esunim liyamacher. Omer Rav Chana bar Rav Amarav. This klola is zu eshes ha'av. This is what you call a stepmother who's married to your father. And banav ubenosav mesurim biyada. She can control the children of her husband like an amacher, as if a foreign alien nation. And that's because they're not her children. She's not their mother. It says further in Sefer Dvarim, Perkaf Ches, Begoy, again, this is the parsha to close, Novel Ach Isem. Here we have Machlokes Amoraim. Who is this referring to? Novel. Omer Rav Chanan bar Rav Amarav. Zo Isha Ra. Uksubas Amaruba. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Elu Atzdokim. V'cheinu Omer Omar Novel B'libo Ein Elo Him. Ishchisu As Evu Alila Ein Oseh Tov. What does it mean, Elokim? someone who says a Elokim is called Novel. And the pasuk is alluding to the Tzdokim. The Masnisa Tana and the Brisa Novel Elu Anshe Birbairia, the Anshe Mat Ternai, Shemehalchem Arumim Bashuk. They walk naked. There's nothing more despicable in front of in the eyes of God, than someone who goes out publicly naked. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Elu Chaborim. Chaborim was a Persian nation that were evil. And they didn't recognize any sort of respect whatsoever for the Jewish people. They used to humiliate the Jews. Now, once the Gemara quotes Rabbi Yochanan, as far as the Chaborim are concerned, the Gemara brings the following story. Amru leila Rabbi Yochanan asu Chabore leBavel. These Persians came to Bavel and they conquered Bavel. Now the state of Bavel is under their dominion. Shka Nafal. Nichvach meirov tsar v'nafal. Yochanan was very upset, of course, by hearing this news, because the Talmidei Yeshiva were under his control. Amru lei, under his protection, I guess to say. Amru lei, they said to him, he doesn't have to be so upset, mekable shukta, that these chabarim can be bribed, and we are able perhaps to nullify their decrees by paying them off. Turrets, the Yosef, got back and stood up, sat down, and he was happy. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, they said to Rabbi Yochanan about these Parsiim, Gazru al Yisrael b'shloshim yonim. And Rabbi Yochanan said that these Gzeros from Bnei Shlosha, because of three Averos that the Bnei Bavel were guilty of. Number one, Gazru al Abasar. They prohibited the eating of slaughtered meat. And he told them that this Gzeira was Mipnei Amatanos, that people were not giving the Matanos to the Kohanim, they were stealing from the Kohanim, Zrola Chayim Mekeva and the like, that they're obligated to give even in Chutz La'aretz. But Inyan Hasheni, number two, Gazru al Merchatzos, that the Jews would not be allowed into the public bathhouses. And Rabbi Yochanan responded that this Gzeira that fits the crime of Bnei Tvila, people were not being careful and meticulous about going to the mikveh. The third Gzeira was called Mechatete Shchave. They would dig graves and dig up even graves that had bodies in it and take out the corpses, the dead bodies. Amalem Rabbi Yochanan said that this Gzeira was Mepnei Shesmechim B'Yom Idam. They would be happy together with the Goyim on Goyish holidays. They would participate in the Chagim of the Goyim. And therefore the Gzeira came upon them that instead of being happy, they'll be in a state of grief. And that's Midah Keneged Midah. The Gemara now quotes this Gzeira of Chitute Shachvi, Shenemar, V'hoisa Yad Hashem B'chem U'Vavosechem, Omar Rabba Bar Shmuel, Chatute Shchavi. How could it be, he asked, in this klola that you could give makos to the ovos already gone? But rather it means chitute shachve. The dead are going to be punished. The Omar Mar be'avon chayim mesim mischad. As a result of the sin of those who are alive, the dead are taken out of their repose, out of their kvarim. Amalei Rava LeRava Bar Mori Siv in the Nevuah of Yirmiyahu on the dead of Israel. Lo ye'osvu kavru ledomen al pnei adamayu. The dead bodies would be thrown in humiliation out of the kvarim. Uksiv, and immediately afterwards it says, the nivchar moves mechayim. They would prefer death to life. Now there's a kasha here. Since the chayim, the live people, see that they're not letting the mason come to kvura, certainly they would not prefer death over life. Amalei says the pasuk does not have in mind that the chayim would rather be dead, Ella, but rather the Navi is telling us that nivchar moves l'rishoyim. It's better death for the Rishon, for the evildoers, shelo yibol mazeh, so that they won't continue to exist in its world, and therefore lo yechtu yipol b'gehenna. In other words, by dying, they won't sin, and had they been alive, they would certainly pursue Gehenna. Kosev b'sefer ben Sira, Isha tova matona tova l'bayla. A good woman is a great gift to her husband. Uksiv tova v'cheik yarei elokim tinaseh. Which means tizkeli nasi lios b'cheikot shel yarei elokim. A good woman will find herself, so to speak, in the bosom of a man who's a Yarei Elokim. On the other side, it says, Isha Ra, Aras Labayla. She's like leprosy to her husband. Mai Takante, Yigar Shena. He should divorce her, he's Rapi Mitaraso, get rid of her leprosy. Isha Yafa, who's good in Yofi, she's beautiful in Maisim, she has great actions, she's righteous, a pious woman. Ashrei Baila, fortunate is her husband. Mu'ushar, he has Rov Simcha. And in his chelek, you could see Mispar Yoma, Kiflayim. It's as if the days of his life were doubled. Like he looked like he's getting more gladness and happiness out of one day than normally would be 2 days. Now make sure you don't look at some other person's beautiful wife. You might end up chashom in an avera. Al tate eitzel baila limsoch yayin v'shecha. Right? Don't like serve a woman's husband by diluting the wine and drinking with him yayin and shecha and beer. Ki b'tor Isha Yafa, when he looks at his beautiful wife, many people were brought down into a state of ashchas, immorality. Vatsumim kol harugeha. Many people, multitudes have fallen to avera as a result of, getting involved with the family drinking situation. Even though it sounds like he's doing this either as a favor or maybe even for pay, doing meziga b'mayim, but nevertheless, be careful. You might come too close for comfort, and especially if you're drinking with them, and it could lead to chas shalom and avera. Rabim hayu pitzei Rochel. A person who sells cosmetics to women so that they can beautify themselves. Amargilim l'dvar avera. With regard to these sellers, Avon calling, we call it, it's quite common to have niyuf, to have adultery. When the husband comes and the seller had sold besamim, and the husband finds that she's alone with this besamim seller, Otza, in Nita, Mavir Gechelis, Kikluv Mole Of, Kain Botean. He says, Kinitos Katan, Shabakocho Mavir Gechelis, you could have a small spark and it could, could hit a coal and set it on fire. And that's the Yetzer Hara of the mocher. And he's like kluv, he's like locked up in a bird coop. And this is what the mocherim who sell the summit to women are malay and mirba. They're full of all sorts of canannery, all sorts of cheating. Again, these are all eitzes from Ben Sira that we started yesterday. Al Teitzer Soras Mochar. Don't be upset today about the tzar of tomorrow. Kilo Teda Mayeled Yom. You don't know what might happen today. Shema Mochar Ba Ve'einenu. Tomorrow's not here yet. Maybe you'll even die today. You'll never live to see the tzara of tomorrow. So drop the daiga, drop the anxiety. If he dies today, then his tsar was for a world that doesn't exist for him. He's not alive. He's not there in the world. Minna Rabin, try to keep the multitudes far away. Asher ein lecha esek imam milios betoch beischa. They shouldn't enter into your house. Lo akol tovi beisecha. Don't bring everything into your house on a regular basis. And even to talk to these people constantly on the outside of you. Rabim yu darshei shlomecha. You should be beloved on everyone. Galei sod li echad mi elef. If you have a secret revealed to 1 out of 1,000, but not to everyone. Omer of Asi ein ben David ba. The Mashiach, the Melech HaMashiach will not come at yichlu kol ad hashamash b'guf. Right, we said Guf was that Otsar, that store place where the neshamas is. You have to wait until all the neshamas in that storehouse will enter into the bodies of people who are going to be born. We're going to see now how Rabbi Asi derives this conclusion. Shenemar, he quotes a pasuk in Yeshayahu Hanavi. I'll read the whole pasuk. It says, "Ki lo le'olam ariv v'lo le'netzach etzof, ki ruach milfanai ya'tov u'neshamos ani yasisi." And the interpretation of the pasuk is as follows: that I'm not going to delay the time for the ultimate redemption. And I'm not going to sort of lenatzeach, to sort of succeed, and declare a victory, ektof miligal. The only reason God declares that the Geula is schlepping along and being delayed is because there's still ruchos lefanai. That's the emphasis here, ki ruach milefanai. And these are the neshamos that are in the guf meaning the storehouse place for the neshamos. And I created this guf, and the neshamos are still with me, God declares. And that's going to be the kavana, the implication of this pasuk, hiruach milfanai. That since the ruchos are still lefanai in the guf, therefore Yatov is la'akev. I'm going to hold back the geula. And uneshamos aniyos sisi. I've created neshamos that have not yet been, so to speak, depleted, meaning youth. They haven't come into this world yet. They're still in the Otzer. That's going to hold up the Geula. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, called Misha Ein Osek, the period of Arivia Kilu Chofech Damim. He's delaying the Geula, and it's as if he spills blood. Jenemar, Pasuk at the beginning of Parshas Noch, it says, Chofech Damim Adam, so the smichus here is being darshan that if someone is not makayim the mitzvah of period of Arivia, it's as if he violated shofech dam ha'adam. Rabbi Yaakov Omer, a person who doesn't involve himself in period of Arivia, kilu memaites hatmus kaviyochel, it's as if he's diminishing the tzelem elokim in this world. Shenemar ki v'tzelem elokim asas ha'adam. It says immediately afterwards, vatem Pru urevu. Hello? Just give me a second. Yeah, 1 second, sorry. Ben Azai Omer, Ilu Shofech Damim, again, Umemait Hatmus, again, but he combines the two. And before that, you have two things. You have B'tzel Kibosas Adam and Shofech Dama Adam Be'adam. Amru Lola Ben Azai, Yeshna Doresh V'no Mekayim. I mean, you're talking about the greatness of marrying a woman and what happens if you don't marry a woman, you don't bring children into this world, and yet you're not married. No Mekayim. The Einar Doresh. And to those who fulfill it without even darshaning about it, Vata, you Ben Azai, no Doresh v'eino Mekayim. Amalen Ben Azai, ma eseh shenafshi choshka b'Torah. My Yetzer Hara doesn't get the best of me. I'm constantly being dedicated to the study of Torah, and because of my cheshik to Torah, I have no hirahur. And even though the Torah requires Yeshuva Shel Olam, but nevertheless, I'm going to rely on the fact that others will bring children into this world. I also think perhaps Ben Azai felt he couldn't discontinue his focus, his awareness of Torah, his connection to Torah, and give marriage what it deserves. Tanya Iduk, we learned another brisa. Rabbi Eliezer Omer called me She'eno osek v'pirvei rivik ilu shofek dam shenemar shofek dam ha'adam ba'adam dam yishofek l'samat le'atem puravu. And the second drasha, Rabbi Lezman Ben Azai Omer ki umemait hadmus Ben Azai Omer, his drasha that's shofek damim and memait hadfus v'chu. Amalol Ben Azai yechna doresh v'chu. Ton Rabbanan. Shuva Hashem Rivos Alpha Yisrael B'nucha Yoma Posuk in Baloscha. Here we turn to Daf Samach Dalid. Malamin Sheina Shechina Shora Al Pachos Mishnei Alofim Ushnei Rivos Yisrael. Minimum of 22,000. So Rivos Alpha Yisrael, the Mir of Alofim Shnayim, the Mir of Rivos Shnayim. And then Moshe Rabbeinu says, Shuva Hashem, that we need 22,000 of Yisrael. So the Shechina Bishora Harei, Shahoy Yisrael, Shnei Alof, Shnei Roos, Chaser Echad, Vizelo Asak, B'Piriv Rivya. He could have been mashlim the number to 22,000, is Lo Nimta, Rhetorical question, Shegore, Lishchina should testalik mi Yisrael, because the Shechina needs that last one. You didn't bring that person into the world. Abu Chanan Omar, Mishum Rabbi Lezer, Eliezer, Chayav Misa. If he's not Osik Pivirisa, he deserves to die. Shenemar, Vayomos Nodav Avil Lifnei Hashem. We don't know exactly what their sin is, but the pasuk testifies Ubanim Lo Hayuleh. They didn't have children. But they had children, Lo Mesu, they wouldn't have deserved to die. Others say, Gorem L'Shchina Shetistalik Mi Yisrael. If he's not Osik, the Shechina will depart. Shenemar, it says in Bereshit Yutzayim, Lioslecha Elokim L'Zarcha Charecha. Bizman Shezarcha Charecha Shechina Shora. Bizman She'ein Zarcha Charecha, you don't have children. Al Mit Shora. Al Eitzim V'Al Havon. And this leads us to the Mishnah here on Daf Samach Dalid Amid Aleph.